Hello everybody, it's Sarah and today I am here with my November wrap-up. And I know the month is only half over, however I have already read 7 books this month. And in the past 3 months I read between 8 and 9 books each, so that's almost the same amount as I read this month. And I kind of didn't like my wrap-ups too much in the past few months because I felt like I either had the choice between kind of skimming over the books and not going really in depth on my thoughts on them, or on the other hand I could just have like a really long wrap-up. And since it doesn't look like I'm going to slow down my reading at all this month, I decided that I wanted to split my wrap-ups into 2 parts / 3 parts, because I just want to go more in depth on the books that I have read without making the wrap-up too long. So I will have this wrap-up, I will have my Tome Topple wrap-up, and then I will kind of have like an end of the month all in all wrap-up. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for and what I'm trying to do this month. So let me get into the first book that I read this month, which was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which is the sequel kind of to The Handmaid's Tale. Although I have heard that it is more a sequel to the TV show than to the book The Handmaid's Tale. So that might be something that you want to look into if you want to pick up this book. I do not think that you have to read The Handmaid's Tale before you go into this book, although I guess it might be nice to know a little bit what's going on beforehand and what exactly is happening and why is the stuff happening in this book that is happening. So The Handmaid's Tale follows Offred, who lives in the country that used to be the United States but is now called Gilead, and they're a society that basically hate women and women do not have any rights. Offred is one of the few women who is still able to bear children, and so she kind of is the belonging of one of the higher ups and basically is used for breeding, and that's the only purpose she has. And if you watched my wrap-up last month where I reread The Handmaid's Tale, you will know that The Handmaid's Tale is one of my absolutely favorite books of all time, which made rating this book quite hard for me, because on the one hand it's a Margaret Atwood book, and Margaret Atwood, if you have ever read anything by her, you will know that she's a very talented author. She has beautiful writing and she has a way of telling a story that very much grips you and that very much pulls you into the story, even if it's maybe a subject that isn't very easy to read about, as in these books where women very much are treated horribly. I like this book as a book, but I did not like it as a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, because personally I think that everything that I loved about The Handmaid's Tale was not in this book. The Handmaid's Tale, the main character, Offred, very much is a passive character. There isn't much she does during the whole book. She is, as I said, very passive. Stuff just kind of happens to her. This book follows 3 characters, 3 female characters, of course, again, who are all 3 very much active in their own destiny, if you kind of understand what I want to say with that. Then the second thing I didn't like as much was the writing in general. Both books are written kind of in a journal format, but this is the journal of 3 different women, whereas The Handmaid's Tale, of course, is just Offred's journal. But The Handmaid's Tale is way more written just as an inner monologue and as the thoughts that Offred had while stuff was happening. So there isn't that much plot to the story because it's just her thoughts. Whereas this is more written as a journal of what was happening at the time to that woman. So again, it's much more active in this book. And I just enjoyed the passive character of The Handmaid's Tale, even though like that might scare you off if you listen to me like that, because like usually we want our books to have a lot of plot. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing is, this is just the most unnecessary book that I have ever read. And what I mean by that is I didn't want to know what happened to Offred. I didn't want to know how Gilead came to be in the first place, which kind of is explained in this book, and I guess probably also in the TV show. I felt like this book just answered a lot of questions that I never had and that I didn't even want answered. one of the things that I love so much about The Handmaid's Tale is that it leaves off at such an open place and that we never really have a conclusion to the story. And so, yeah, that was just kind of unnecessary. So I still gave it 4 stars all in all, because like if I just go by the writing and by the storytelling, it is like a 5-star book, obviously. But if I compare it to The Handmaid's Tale, it's just a 3-star book, so I decided to give it 4 stars. And then there also was a bit of controversy around this book, because if you didn't know, this book is one of the 2 winners of the Booker Prize this year, and people felt like it wasn't the book that won the prize, but like Margaret Atwood's whole bibliography. And even just reading this book and not having read the other book, which by the way is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which I now have, luckily, thanks to my dad, because I didn't want to buy it on my own because it's really expensive. And I intend to read this. But anyway, this is the other book. And so people were kind of upset about that, rightfully so, because Margaret Atwood is like a really famous, well-known white author, whereas Girl, Woman, Other, the author Bernardine Evaristo, is an author of color, a bit lesser known. And like, I haven't read this book yet, but I do think even just reading this book, this probably deserved the Booker Prize more. I will just allow myself to say that, because this just, it can't stand on its own, and it's just not as good as The Handmaid's Tale by far. And yeah, so yeah, but we'll see. I will probably read this in December, so I will come back to you with my December wrap up and tell you what my final thoughts on this whole dilemma is. Okay, so the second book I read this month was The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White, which is the first book in a series, which I believe is called the Camelot Rising series. And this was kind of an accidental read because I went to the bookstore. I went to the bookstore like 4 times last week because I was waiting for them to get in Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Gnan, which is the second book to the Girls of Paper and Fire series thingy. And I saw this and it looked really intriguing because honestly this is a beautiful cover. I really love this trend of having like illustrated covers because like faces on covers are ugly. Illustrated faces on covers, however, are perfect. Anyway, this follows Guinevere, who is sent to marry Arthur by Merlin to protect Arthur from some evil dark thing rising and wanting to kill Arthur. However, she is not really Guinevere, hence the Guinevere Deception. She is a changeling and we do not really know what she is, we do not really know who she is. This whole book kind of follows discovering who she is and also kind of discovering what exactly it is that threatens Arthur and threatens Camelot. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars in total. It was a one sitting read for me, I think, and I do find myself falling into always the same patterns when it comes to Arthurian retellings, which I do enjoy every now and again. The first one of them, Mordred, is and always will be my baby, which is kind of tragic because like if you know anything about the Arthurian legend, you will know that in 90% of the books, I will not say if it's the case in this book or not, but in 90% of the books, sooner or later he's gonna be the evil guy because he's the evil guy in the original. So yeah, that's kind of tragic and kind of sad because he's always my baby. I love him. Then a second pattern that I usually have that I broke with this book is that I usually hope that they won't go the road of the Arthur, Lancelot and Guinevere love triangle thingy because usually I really love Arthur and I just don't want him to be hurt, and I also really love him in this book and I also don't want him to be hurt in this book, and there is not a love triangle yet in this story. We can't even see it in this story if that's gonna be something that the author will do in one of the future books, but I really want her to do it. I really want to see that love triangle in one of the future books, and I won't tell you why I really want it because that will be a spoiler, but if you have read the book, you will probably know why I want it. But yeah, I really loved all the characters in this book. There weren't really any characters that I disliked. Some of the like villains were a bit tropey, but that's also kind of something that I want from an Arthurian retelling. Like, usually in fantasy books, I do not like my like evil tropey villains. I like a little bit of kind of dimension to my villains or to all characters, but I think then you have stories that are so archetypical, like the Arthurian legend, and thus also Arthurian retellings, that I really enjoy it if like the characters follow a bit like the tropes that they're supposed to be and aren't like too divergent from those tropes. So I really enjoyed that about the book, and I would highly recommend it. Next, I went to the bookstore again to get Girls of Storm and Shadow, and didn't want to leave without anything in my hand, because who wants to leave a bookstore empty-handed? So I thought I'd finally pick up A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer, which is the first book in the Curse Breakers series, again I think it's called. And I just find myself currently, although I actually am done with it now, I think, but I found myself these past 2 weeks like really in a mood for kind of maybe a little bit trashy YA romance-focused books that are in a fantasy setting, and yeah, this just really hits the spot. For those of you who don't know, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. We have a dual perspective. Both of them are in first person, which, if you know me at all, you will know that I am not the biggest fan of that. But anyway, this follows a dual perspective. One of them is a prince who has had a curse on him, and he has to relive the season of his 18th birthday again and again, and at the end of each season he turns into a monster before he dies and then starts the season anew. And as usual, to break the curse, he has to have a girl who falls in love with him. And the second perspective we follow is Harper, who is a girl from our time who is taken to that fantastical land where the prince is from, and who has to help him break the curse. And so it's a very straightforward Beauty and the Beast retellings. I think it's actually one of the ones I like more. It's kind of a hate to love, because Harper, of course, has been kidnapped to that castle, so she's not, to say the least, very fond of the prince. But the prince, of course, doesn't love her, but he has done this for, I think, 300 times now, or something around that number. And so he's just in despair. He isn't really motivated anymore. He's just like very sad. And Harper kind of breathes life back into him in a way. And so I really enjoyed their dynamic. I think it's one of the better done Beauty and the Beast retellings, of which we have way too many already. But the thing that I dislike the most probably about this book is that it's the first book in a series. I think this would be perfect as a standalone, and I do not really think that it needs to continue on. I cannot really see how it's gonna get any better, because one of the things that I just enjoyed most, again, was the dynamic between the prince and Harper. And since that's gone now, basically, it's just, I'm not sure how much I want to pick up the second book. But we'll see, it'll come out soon anyway, so yeah. But that's the third book that I read this month so far. And then I read the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, which is The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. And I only read the series because my bookstore already had The Queen of Nothing, as a lot of bookstores apparently do, even though it's only gonna be published on the 19th, which I think is actually really shitty. My bookstore actually also already has Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which is supposed to come out on the 26th. And I'm kind of happy, but also hate myself that I ordered the hardcover UK edition from the UK, so I already paid a lot more than I usually would for a book to order that like version of Starsight. So I am not going to pay another 16 euros just to read it earlier. I will not. So yeah, that's a little tangent there. Anyway, I saw The Queen of Nothing, and so far I haven't really ever been in the mood or felt the need to read this series. I know it's very hyped on BookTube and on BookTwitter and like on the book blogger sphere, but it just wasn't something that particularly interested me in the past few years, and so I never really felt the need to pick it up. However, when I saw Queen of Nothing, I was like, it might be like kind of neat, so to say, if I were to read the series just as a whole and finish it before like most other people can finish it. So that's what I did. And also, as I said, with A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I kind of felt myself like in a mood for a little bit trashy, high fantasy, YA romances, so I thought that would hit that spot perfectly, and it really did. And with that mood is now satisfied, and I don't feel the need to pick up any others for the moment, although I'm sure the mood will come again. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think this is a solid 4-star series. I do not think it quite warrants the hype that everyone like built around this series, because while I do think it's very enjoyable, I absolutely love Cardan's and Jude's dynamic. I really think it's one of the best hate to love romances that I have ever read, because you can kind of feel the tension between them. I just also don't think that this will be particularly memorable to me. I think this might have been like really one of the big nostalgia series along the Mortal Instruments if I had read it like maybe 7 years ago or something. But now, at the point I am in my life, I really enjoy reading it, but then I close the last page and then that's that. And the thing where I can probably most show you what I mean is that when I finished Dark Dawn and I had no one to talk to about with Dark Dawn, I was dying. I was like, I went to everyone who would listen to me who didn't want to read the series, and I told them everything about the series and spoiled them because I just needed to talk about what happened in that last book. However, I finished Queen of Nothing and like, I don't particularly feel the need to talk to anyone about it. By the way, the whole cover is spoilers, which I kind of enjoyed when I finished the book. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it for Jude's and Cardan's dynamic, which was kind of different than in Queen of Nothing, so I did not enjoy this quite as much anymore. I really loved how unlikable Cardan actually is, although he definitely has joined my club of like fictional babies, together with Mordred, and like Jem belongs to the club, Kieran from the Dark Artifices belongs to that club, Trick from the Nevernight Chronicles belongs to the club. So yeah, I have like this club of fictional babies that I will do anything for, and Cardan definitely belongs to the club. The thing I didn't like about the series though is that there wasn't really a redemption arc with him. Like, he is really, really shitty in the first book and kind of also in the second book. And of course he has, like all bad boy YA characters, he has a backstory why he is shitty, but I don't think that those backstories should be an excuse, and just an excuse to like just gloss over everything they did. And he has to be shitty. It's called The Cruel Prince, the first book. Of course he's gotta be shitty, but yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind if you don't like bad boy characters. Definitely don't read this series. I love Jude though as a main female character. I found her very relatable, and yeah, kind of because she has this thing where she's just so scared, and that's why she's always angry and aggressive, because she knows if she isn't angry she's just gonna break down. And it was a very relatable feeling for me, but like not with anger. But last year when I had cancer, I was just always happy and just always in a good mood, because I felt like if I am not in a good mood, then I'm gonna break down and just cry. So like that part of her was very, very relatable to me, and she is definitely one of my favorite YA female characters that I have read about so far. So yeah, solid 4-star series. would recommend if you're ever in the mood to read a very romance-based YA series that is easy to read. I read this in 4 days, all 3 books, so yeah, highly recommendable. And that was it, the 7th book that I read so far this month. I read 4 Tome Topple already, so I will go into that when I finish my Tome Topple wrap up. And by the way, if you're wondering what these books back there are, they're already my preparation for my favorite books of 2019 video. But anyway, that was it for this video. Tell me if you're also reading a lot in November currently. How are you doing with Tome Topple as well? But yeah, that was it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!